Welcome to the original Gangsters podcast. I'm your host, Scott Burnstein. Quick hitter edition. We're going to go back up to Canada. A lot of news to report per usual. Big arrest this past week. Raids and arrests in Montreal related to the Rizzuto crime family. Montreal mob skipper Eastside Marco Pizzi was arrested in the last couple days. His business was raided. His car was searched. We've reported on here before that the differences between the Canadian justice system and the U.S. justice system. In the U.S., when you're arrested in a situation like that, you've already been indicted. In Canada, it's kind of the other way around. First, you're arrested, then you're indicted, potentially. So this could, in theory, not turn into anything, but it could turn into a gangsterism case because he's being investigated for gangsterism, which is the Canadian version of racketeering. And this past week at about 6:30 in the morning, which is when they tend to come, they went into or met Pizzi when he was arriving at work. I think maybe around 7:30. I said 6:30. I think it was 7:30. And met him arriving at work at his automobile dealership and searched him, detained him, searched his car. Marco Pizzi is really the picture of resolve, and is kind of maybe an encapsulation of the Rizzuto Mafia empire right now. A lot of these guys that are Leo Rizzuto's age, guys in their mid-50s, late 40s, early 50s, seem to have really showed their merit over the last couple of years in keeping the ship from hitting the iceberg and going down like the Titanic. And these are the type of guys that aren't just dodging the crown in terms of investigations. They're actively dodging murder contracts, shootings, fire bombings. And Marco Pizzi is kind of the, again, he kind of represents that level of resilience that this entire group has shown. I got a report that was given out to the press from some law enforcement agencies in Canada related to Pizzi and the automobile dealership that he makes his headquarters at has been a target of shootings and fire bombings 24 times in the last 8 years. 24 shootings and fire bombings. Pizzi has avoided at least 3 murder contracts in the last decade or so. We talked last month, something that came out in some court filings about him being on the scene when his cousin, Tony Boots, Colocchio, was murdered, and he had just excused himself at the last minute to go to the bathroom. When the hit team came in, he was behind the wheel of his Mercedes back in 2016, around the time of the power shift and the murders of Saw Solicito and Skunk Giordano, when the family went over to Leo Rizzuto. Marco Pizzi survived a drive-by shooting with automatic weapon fire. There was another time, I think back in 2013, he survived another shooting. And then just over the last 2 years in the feud with the Hells Angels, his business, his vehicles were targeted with shootings and fire bombings. So this guy really knows how to tiptoe through the landmines and avoid gunfire, avoid death, avoid incarceration, even though he's somebody that's been tied and arrested before. He was tied to a big drug case back in the 2000s. And now it looks like he is back under scrutiny by, this is local Montreal police. This wasn't the SQ or the RCMP. This was a series of local agencies that arrested him this week. So, Marco Pizzi again, is now gone from somebody that seems to be in the crosshairs of law enforcement, and one of these guys that has been able to avoid the peril or the violence of the street warfare. And once you clear that hurdle, now you got to deal with the government. And he's one of a number of high-ranking members of the Montreal Mafia that are currently under investigation. Himself, Baldy Barbario, and maybe most notably the one-time underboss, Little Sauce Solicito, who's battling some health concerns right now, is also the top suspect in a murder investigation, a homicide inquiry into a 2021 gangland homicide. But I digress. But right now, we're not sure if Marco Pizzi is going to face an indictment, but he was arrested. His business was raided. Last thing to talk about up in Canada that I want to just do on a housekeeping note, some information that came to me. We love looking for these little kind of layers, multidimensionality of stories that maybe you've already heard before, but haven't heard from important angles. And we all know about the Rizzuto, the great Canadian Mafia war, the Rizzuto Empire kind of crumbling from within for a decade plus until it kind of was able to kind of come back with reckless abandon these last, let's say, last year. But we know that there was an insurgence. We know a lot of members of the Rizzuto inner circle in the late 2000s jumped from the Rizzuto camp and formed an insurgence trying to oust the Rizzuto family. One of the from power, one of the major players was a guy named Giuseppe DeVito, Ponytail or Joe Ponytail Joe DeVito, and he was poisoned in prison. This is all common knowledge. In 2013, was poisoned. But what we learned recently, and you can check out an article on our companion web magazine, The Gangster Report, was from our sourcing and from some government documents, what specifically led Ponytail Joe DeVito to leave the Rizzuto side of the war and align with Desjardins and Sal Montagna and Joe DeMallo. And what it really came down to was a drug ripoff. DeVito found out that he had been cheated or shortchanged or cheated of $500,000 in a drug shipment that was coming in cabinetry for home remodeling jobs coming over from Europe. He was, in a smuggling business operation with other high-ranking members of the Rizzutos, and they were using these home furnishings to smuggle drugs in. He was informed that there was a certain amount of drugs that were coming through in this one shipment. I think he was told it was $500,000 amount of product, and then when it landed and arrived here, it was $1 million, and they tried to basically sneak it under his nose. And people got paid. He didn't see the money that he felt he was owed, and I'm told there was a big altercation at a lawyer's office. And then shortly thereafter, he was a fugitive and was on the run for 4 years, but joined Desjardins and Montagna and DeMallo in trying to oust the Rizzutos. And then it was this drug smuggling deal, this $1 million drug smuggling deal that ended up souring Ponytail Joe DeVito on the Rizzutos. He's a guy that the authorities in Canada think committed well over a dozen homicides. A guy that was doing hits while he was a fugitive, allegedly. And it's just some interesting insight that we were able to get. So please like, share, and subscribe. Original Gangsters podcast. We're here all week, every week, breaking down the most important, critical news when it comes to gangland activity, underworld activity in North America. Again, like, share, subscribe, spread the word. We got your true crime fix. Scott Burnstein, Original Gangsters podcast, uncovering the underworld, one city, one region, one country at a time. I'm out.